Welcome to the Creative Condition podcast, an ongoing series of conversations and considerations to help people understand and embrace their own unique creativity for fulfilling lives and brilliant careers. My name is Ben Tallon. I'm an illustrator and author, and I bring 16 years of creative industry experience working with the New York Times, The Guardian, the Premier League, and more. And I invite designers, artists, psychologists, scientists, coaches, athletes, sensitivity experts, and all kinds of thought leaders to help us broaden our knowledge of creativity. Creativity is a fundamental pillar of human happiness, a vital ingredient in the solutions to our problems, but so often misunderstood. The show is supported by founding sponsor and B Corp, Illustration X. Take a look at their stunning range of illustrators and animators at illustrationx.com. If you like the music for the show, it's by Dirty Freud, who you can listen to now on Spotify and all good music streaming services.
I think junior talent, you kind of want them to have mad ideas that don't necessarily fall within maybe the most commercial execution, because you're just going to make everything look the same.
Today I'm joined by Love Creative Senior Creative Eve Warren. Eve and I are discussing a damaging new trend and its over-the-top, unreasonable expectations on new graduates and creative talent at junior level. Eve recently started a thread on social media which brought a lot of attention and people felt quite strongly about it. So we wanted to dive into that, and we have a meandering, thoughtful conversation about what could be expected, what should be expected of both education and industry to ensure that new creative talent is given the time to do what they do best, and that is be creative and bring new ideas to the table. This is the Creative Condition podcast. Hello and welcome to the show. How are you doing, guys? This is the Creative Condition podcast. My name is Ben Tallon. New intro for you there. What do you reckon? I've been doing a lot of digging to try and grow this show, and the great guys over at Buzzsprout have been filling my head with ideas through their great podcast. They run a fantastic YouTube podcast, so for anybody else who's getting into podcasting or is a podcast host that might be listening to this, it's well worth having a look at their YouTube channel, full of great content. And one of the things that they highlighted the importance of was telling people what this podcast is about and why you're the person to do it. And when I looked at the copy for my intro dialogue and the way that I kind of ramble, which is kind of nice, and it's the style I do things in, and it's the way this show is, I realised that I wasn't really bigging up my credentials to do this, my 16 years of experience in the industry and my love of creativity and why people need that, which is to lead fulfilling lives and optimal careers. So there you go. I hope you like that. You know, what's really funny is, and I think it speaks to creativity at large, I've been doing this for 7 years and I'm just realising that. And there's something to be said about that. You can't speed these things up. I think you arrive at these, it's not a case of sitting back and being lazy, but I think that sometimes you can't rush certain aspects of creativity. And in my case, certainly I'm always learning, especially in this field, because I'm not formally trained. You know, this is something that I've got into out of pure passion, love of creativity, and an ever-growing desire to help society and individuals to better understand and embrace their creativity for the good of them and us all. That's what it boils down to, all this stuff, because the older I get, I'm 41 years old now, the more that I see to prove that really creativity is up there for us humans, for happiness and for belonging and fulfillment. You know, I'm interviewing the wonderful Athena Akapis this Wednesday for the show. And Athena is a professor in Arizona, the university. And in some circles, she's known as the zombie professor. I'm not going to get too deep into why now, but that's going to be the kind of the episode that we do. And she talks about psychologies in apocalyptic times, one of which we are living in right now on many levels. And there's a beautiful example in there about an earthquake in San Francisco in 1906, which completely fucked infrastructure and left, over half the population homeless. And yet there are eyewitness reports at the time about how everyone pulls together. Everyone came together, everyone innovated, everyone created to find solutions in this strife, because quite quickly the facade of our society and, time is money and jobs and everything that holds us back from holding better communities and better embracing our creativity, it falls away in these circumstances. And the good of humans, by and large, obviously there's a few exceptions, I was going to get looters and things like that, but people come together. People innately want to help each other and build communities and thrive and create, and that's what happened. There were reports of, within the tents where people were sheltering and coming together while they got back on their feet after the earthquake, of music, of song, of laughter and dance, and people making and doing and talking and coming together, and I just find it really beautiful. So Athena and I are going to get into that stuff. But the more I do this, the more I only hear more validation of why creativity is critical to every single one of us in our small communities, on an individual basis, and at large in this global economy in which we live. So, I'm big on it. That's why I'm doing it. So I'm shouting about it, and I wanted to just clarify at the top of the show there why I'm doing this. But anyway, not to ramble, big thank you to the founding sponsors of this podcast, Illustration X. They've been there since day one, 7 years and counting. B Corp, brilliant agency doing so much great work in the arts, particularly around issues that affect us all, intellectual property, AI, all that stuff. Really important player along with the likes of Society of Artists Agents, former show sponsor, the Association of Illustrators. And again, it's that community. We feel better when we're a part of something. So it's great that these heavyweights are slogging on our behalf. So go out and check everything that they're doing at illustrationx.com. Little bit of housekeeping. The numbers are rising on the show, so thank you guys. Thank you for listening. If you're a regular, I really appreciate your shout outs, your feedback. It means a lot. It can feel a very lonely business sitting in this garden studio of mine and rambling on here, so I do love to hear from you. So please do let me know if you enjoy a particular show. If there's a way you think I can improve, let me know. I'm wide open to criticism. I want to get better. Some critiques in the past have really helped me to develop as a host. I used to prattle on too much sometimes, and I feel like these days I'm better at handing back to my guests and giving them the majority of the spotlight, because this is not about me, this is about creativity, so it's about the best value on that level. Also a shout out to the Ukrainian Institute. So for those regulars, you will know that recently I did a double barrel episode as we hit 2 years since the Russian invasion of Ukraine. I talked to the inspiring and powerful Olya Protosova, who is an illustrator, designer and design community activist from Kiev, and we talked about creativity in times of war. So that was a tough episode. It was an enlightening episode, and it was full of bravery and defiance and inspiration and creativity. So go back and listen to that. And I followed it up with a short story called The Hockney Soldier, because there was a tragic story of somebody's art and design book collection being sold to a second-hand bookstore in Kiev because that person had to go and fight in a war. That is incomprehensible to me, and I guess a lot of you guys will feel the same way. But I didn't want to run away from that. I didn't want to avoid that pain. I wanted to feel that pain. I wanted to look at my own bookshelf and understand just what my lifelong collection of art and design books means to me. I've dragged these things around every place I've ever lived, and they are there front and center on coffee tables on my bookshelf, and I talk about them and I love them, and I share them with people who visit my studio. And the idea that I would have to go and fight knowing that I might not be coming back, sell those books, it's just heartbreaking. So I wrote a story called The Hockney Soldier, and you can hear that on the Creative Stories number 3, I think, episode. Anyway, a few episodes ago. And off the back of that, I've started a lovely relationship with the Ukrainian Institute, who work hard to connect to Ukrainian creative industry, which is brilliant and brave, and they keep on even in this horrific time because they know that as humans we need something more than just surviving. And we're working together to try and champion Ukrainian creative talent. So if you host a podcast, if you have an opportunity for really talented people, please do go and have a look at these guys at ur.org.ua. Brilliant stuff, great ongoing projects. So think about those guys, get them involved. Really important stuff. As far as the book, thank you once again to the wonderful Kickstarters. You should all be receiving your books and your prints one by one. I am doing them in daily bursts. I am doing everything I can as one guy doing this independently, so bear with me. The books are coming every day. That pile is getting smaller. And the pre-orders are trickling in, so thank you. If you want to pre-order your copy, you get a signed copy from bentallenwriter.com /shop. You can go and grab your advanced. You can pre-order your signed copies now. It's out on April the 11th. It's also available on Amazon Kindle for pre-order for you e-readers, and I am going to be starting work when the book is out on an audiobook. So for those of you podcast listeners who like these velveteen Yorkshire tones, then you might want that one. And that's going to be coming, but bear with me because that's going to be a monster of a task to sit here and record that entire thing. But I am going to do it. It's a kind of a must, really, isn't it? Given I've been doing this for so long. So that's the book updates. Yeah, check it out. It's the next chapter of my own career. I'm very passionate about this. There are 64 guest interviews, plus a lot of excerpts and quotes and other input from all kinds of fields like science and psychology and sensitivity and firefighters and ex-convicts and all kinds of people from across the spectrum of our society. So I hope you will consider that. Head over now, bentallenwriter.com /shop. Interviewing Athena Akapis tomorrow, professor at the Arizona State University. My word, she's a powerhouse. She does so much. Look her up. Incredible. Her previous books are something special. She had a fantastic podcast, of which the name, to my shame, evades me right now. But she has this whole beautiful model of the zombie apocalypse as a model to get prepared for adversity in our own lives, to find out our own strengths and weaknesses, and all this great stuff about apocalypse psychology, which we're going to be getting deep into. So that's going to be a cracker. I've got Radim Malinic back on the show. Radim recently released beautiful double shot of books, Creativity for Sale and The Mindful Creative. Radim is a force of nature. Those of you who listened to him on episode 119 will remember that, and he's already given us a dose of his inspiration, so go back and listen. That's your homework. That episode, part 2 with Radim, is coming up soon. We're going to get deep into all things creativity. Radim's creativity, my creativity, creativity at large, and his wonderful collection of books. So all that coming up. Today then, Eve Warren. So I will share the threads in the notes, but I stumbled across a thread that Eve had started on X about this horrible new trend, and there are reasons why, and I am not completely setting out to demonize or blame the businesses who advertise for jobs of this nature, but there's a trend, and it's asking far too much of new creative talent. Now, this is not a cotton wool thing. This is not about wrapping new talent in cotton wool, but it's about giving them breathing space to develop and to learn, and appreciating the fact that nobody coming out of higher education or even with 2 years experience in the industry is ready to deliver some of the things that are being asked in job requirements. We're talking about job listings that have essentially what should be like 5, 6, 7 different people's specialist areas in the job description. Let's put it simply, people are taking the piss. Now, there are reasons why. There are constraints on businesses. Belts are being tightened. The economy is up shit creek. So there, I understand why. But what it's doing is it's exploiting people who are more advanced. So it's giving junior roles to poor people in senior roles who can't find work, who are desperate and are taking these jobs that are beneath their pay grade. Therefore, the people who are just coming into, their careers 2 years in, or just coming out of university, are being asked far too much. Now, new talent and fresh talent needs to be nurtured by experienced creative directors, art directors, CEOs, whatever the role might be that they're working under. They must be given time to develop, to create, to bring fresh ideas to the table, because if that's not what new talent is, then we're getting it really wrong. And Eve and I are going to be discussing this. I must apologise up front. there was a slight technical hitch, and it means that there is a little tinny echo after some of my bits of dialogue. Thankfully, the majority of the dialogue is Eve and not me, so hopefully it's not too much of an issue, but be aware of it, and I am sorry there's not a lot that can be done about it once the recording is in the bag. And it's been a while since I've had one of these tech hitches, but there we are. There's been worse. It's not too disruptive, and I hope that you can forgive it. Eve is brilliant. Eve is a senior creative at Love. Love are a Manchester agency working with all kinds of global clients, and they're they're one of those beautiful agencies like Dixon Baxi and Bulletproof, of which we've had Simon Aporva and Gush respectively on the show in the past, who set a brilliant example of nurturing new talent and respecting them and cherishing them and enabling them to step up and to grow in the right way, not by lumping all these crazy requirements and requests and demands on them. So that's today's episode. I would love your feedback. I think it's one that's going to generate conversation. I will try to do that on the social channels. Hit me up at Ben Talon on Instagram, at Ben Talon on X, also at _creative condition on Instagram. I'm spending far more time on there now. That is the key area for the creative condition. So tag us on there as well, will you? Cheers. So yeah, let's not ramble on too much. Big thank you to the founding sponsor of the show, Illustration X. Oh, and one more thing, I am going to be, as part of the launch activities, so there's going to be a Manchester launch on the 18th of April. Yes, I'm going to be inviting. It's going to be an invite-only tackle, but if you really want to be there, if you're in Manchester, if you hear this, hit me up. I will get you an invitation. I've got to start getting those out soon. The clock is ticking. I'm also going to be signing a few books, all being well, at Off Festival in Barcelona, where I am on the Friday night in a live conversation with Stefan Sagmeister, who of course was on the show on episode 199, and we are going again talking about long-term thinking, optimism, productivity, and attacking our collective problems with creativity. It's going to be a belter of a conversation, as long as I don't completely capsize in a nervous mess on stage. It's going to be about 2,000 people watching it, I believe. It's by far my biggest audience so far. So if you're going to Off, hit me up, let me know. Let's exchange numbers. I keep an eye on my WhatsApp. I'm a little rubbish on my socials when I'm out there because I don't like spending too much time on my phone, and it's a festival and you've got to be there in the moment. But WhatsApp is the primary channel. That's the one I'll check. So if you want to come and say hello, come and grab a coffee or a beer. I'm going to be at the festival from Thursday to Saturday. Like I say, speaking on the Friday night, so I might be a bit scarce on the Friday while I'm shitting myself in my hotel room and preparing with my notes. It's all good. It's majority excitement, minority daunting. Anyway, here's a conversation with Eve Warren, senior creative at Love Creative. Enjoy.
I'm quite lucky. I kind of come from a creative background. So my dad's a designer and my mum's a ceramicist. So drawing and lots of like creative things was always kind of a thing growing up. I was very lucky to kind of always go on family holidays that involved going and looking at art and making things. And I think I kind of remember like not being allowed to be bored. So if we had like a pen and paper with us, then that was kind of our entertainment. So I was like very lucky that in that sense. And like my family are quite colourful. My dad has a great record collection. So I think from like a good foundation, I think me and my sister in particular definitely had a good. We kind of like never had any chance to become a doctor, I guess.
Yeah.
So it's definitely in our blood, creativity. So yeah, both my parents are from kind of Manchester area anyway. So both from quite working class backgrounds. Both actually went to university, which I think is quite rare for kind of the time. So they both kind of went to university in the late 70s, early 80s, which I'm quite jealous about. Must have been quite good.
Yeah.
So yeah, I kind of think that was kind of a really cool thing, kind of growing up hearing all about kind of art college. And I think that was kind of very much ingrained in me from an early age that I wanted to go to art college. And then throughout school, I guess I wasn't the most academic, but definitely found myself in the art department with a lot of my friends. I didn't really go to a school that had a sixth form, so I went to like a a sixth form college that was about 40 minutes away because I kind of grew up in the countryside. So it was always an effort to kind of have to get on a bus to go to school or college. Um, and I did a BTEC in graphic design,
Me too.
which was great because I didn't have to do a foundation, which also kind of feel like I wish I'd done. But I did end up missing out on paying 9 grand a year. I was the last kind of year to go to uni on like 3 grand.
I was a 3 grander as well. Yeah, we were lucky.
So very lucky. So I kind of think my path into kind of design was fairly straightforward. I was always encouraged. I never had to kind of discover it through a teacher or yeah, I think it was one of those things that just naturally happened. And then I went to Leeds College of Art at probably I was just 18. So I'm a summer baby. So very naively packed my bags to Leeds and yeah, had a great time and met lots of great friends. And I was kind of part of a year where it was quite a very successful year. I think a few people started their own businesses. We were quite encouraged to kind of start being quite entrepreneurial from the start of that course. And there was kind of a few kind of small boutique kind of studios that came out of it. And even my partner started a studio from that course as well. So just again, just lucky to be around really good people from the kind of start of my career.
Yeah, yeah, that sounds really were you aware of the kind of, that they given the sort of parent situation, were you aware of the creative industry that there was this path and it was something that you could pursue? Like at what time in school did you start to become aware of that?
Um, quite early on, I remember because my dad designs kind of magazines or did design magazines. I remember kind of being on his Mac from probably about 6 or 7 and just playing around on the computer and probably like just drawing my own kind of little books and magazines. I remember being at school and obviously being very obsessed with like Harry Potter and kind of coming up with my own stories and making little zines and stuff. So yeah, I kind of have vivid memories of like maybe creating stories quite early on and kind
Mm.
of coming up with the visuals for it again quite early on. So yeah, probably primary school.
That's cool. Yeah, because I'm similar in that my mum went to college and always encouraged my drawing and artistic side. But my mum really, I mean, she sort of stopped at the foundation level and didn't know anything about industry. So while I had all the support and no pressure, which for me is a magic combination, there was no real awareness of what it looked like as a career. I just sort of got told the classic, you're going to be doing this a long time, choose wisely, choose with your heart kind of thing, and then just given the freedom to go and do that. So that was lovely, but it did take a few accidental mentors and stumbles along the way to get a sense that this could be a job.
Yeah, I think in hindsight, I guess because I've always worked in agencies and small studios, maybe I didn't know about brand. It was probably just more that you could be a designer of some sort of visual art. Maybe I didn't know necessarily kind of the career path I wanted to take, but it was definitely, I always knew it was an option. Um, yeah.
So tell us about your role today. So you're currently at Love.
Yes. So I've been at Love for 2.5 years. It was definitely a lockdown kind of move. So previous to Love, I kind of worked in various different studios from kind of junior to midway level. And then during COVID, I got promoted to a senior and had just a little bit of a kind of a feeling that I kind of needed another change, another challenge. And because I started my career out in Manchester initially, I just really liked the kind of creative energy in the city. And Love was just kind of the next step for me, I guess. And I do a lot of packaging work, so do a lot of FMCG, which is kind of more commercial packaging, I guess. And then we do a lot of like luxury brands as well, some more kind of spirits and kind of alcohol brands.
Cool. And what sort of, just to sort of lead into where we're going to go with this topic, how many staff are within? Is it just Manchester? No, there's London and Manchester. Is that right?
Just Manchester, yeah.
Is it
So
just Manchester? Right.
yes, I think my boss would be very much, yeah, he's very much, he's proud that it's a Manchester studio. So, and it kind of does have that feeling to it. It's definitely got an identity to it that it's kind of, yeah, it's got a kind of a renegade energy to it.
Mm. Yeah,
Uh,
my only brush so far with that. I did a little bit of test work last year with Mel,
oh
and
yeah,
which was fun. But yeah, the whole language around it, the A Up Love and all that stuff. It has a real crackle to it, which is very alluring. So how many are within the agency?
I think probably about 80. It kind of changes because we have like freelance supporting, and again, it depends on the kind of work we've got at the moment. So probably around 80 people.
That sounds like a good number in
Mm.
terms of the ability to do a lot of great work, but actually kind of keep it within the family, if you know what I mean.
Yeah. And it's kind of like it's probably the biggest place I've ever worked. So it was definitely a shock when I first worked there because I was used to maybe more being involved in every single project, whereas sometimes I don't know the ins and outs of someone who sat next to me's work. It's kind of um one of those places where there's just so much stuff going on at the same time. It's quite impossible to kind of have all your things in pies. And sometimes I feel like I want to be involved in everything because I'm really nosy.
Yeah,
Um, but it's really good. It's got a great energy to it.
brilliant. Well, let's get into the topic then. So, if you don't mind just recapping the thread which brought this conversation about, that'd be really cool, just to give the listener a little insight.
Yeah, sure. So I think as I kind of mentioned before that both me and my sister have both gone to art college, both kind of encouraged by our parents to pursue a career in the creative arts or the creative industry. And I studied graphic design, so I've kind of got a very different view and kind of different experience to her because she studied fashion, which is notoriously hard industry to get into. And I think as I've kind of supported her through her kind of education, because she's 6 years younger than me, you see, so I think a lot has changed since I went to university, even though it was 10 years ago. I feel like it's quite a different place. And she went to London University, I went to a Northern university. So there was lots of differences already that I kind of noticed as she kind of progressed. Obviously, COVID happened, so she was one of the unlucky ones to have to kind of study throughout that, especially on a practical course like fashion.
Mm.
She didn't get to use facilities and stuff. But I guess the only saving grace was that it was a 4 year course with a sandwich year. So one of those sandwich years was kind of the end of COVID, which allowed her to kind of go into industry and intern. So again, because I come from a graphic design background, I think even though I did experience probably a couple of unpaid internships, I did, as an intern, get paid, or like a fresh graduate. I did find myself in paid positions and didn't have to exactly jump through that many hoops to get myself some experience. Obviously, I had to hustle, but it wasn't like the level she's had to kind of go through. And I think as my Twitter thread kind of talked about, I'm quite frustrated with what she's had to kind of prove to get a foot in the door. So I think as obviously I'm giving her advice for these sorts of interviews and helping her put her portfolio together. I think applying to these sorts of roles, like graduate roles, means you have to kind of go through multiple kind of tests and kind of I guess briefs that you get given to just have an interview, or and I think that's quite a lot to ask, I guess. And some of these briefs are quite commercial. Like even when I've read through the briefs, there's kind of a commercial element to them that maybe they're kind of asking for more of a broader role than they're actually advertising for. And quite from a sense that maybe you'd need experience to know how to answer some of these briefs as well. Or even access to sort of like news sources. Like I guess some of these briefs she's kind of been having to kind of require a bit of like trend forecasting, I guess. And I guess with trend forecasting, there's a lot of kind of platforms or paywalls to kind of articles where you'd find this information to be able to answer some of these briefs. So even that itself, it's like you have to know where to look to know where some of this information lives.
Mm.
And you very much have your ear to the ground and be, have an interest in fashion where maybe you're on TikTok and you've got a viewpoint on influencer culture or street style. But I guess some of these kind of briefs that she has been kind of told to kind of answer are, I don't know, I just find they're not kind of graduate projects that you could just tackle as a 22, 23-year-old junior designer. It's something I would expect maybe someone who's got about 5 years worth of experience to be able to tackle. And that's a long answer. But I guess what I'm trying to say is I've just become quite frustrated with the kind of hoops she's had to jump through and the kind of expectations that is being put on fashion graduates. I personally don't think this is the same for graduates for in design or advertising. I know advertising's got a whole heap of issues, but I think fashion is particularly I think you have to have money to be able to get a foot in the door personally.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know a lot about it, but what I do know would very much tally with that and
Mhm.
suggest that, I mean, we know that there are sort of barriers for working class people in a lot of creative industries, but I would imagine that that's really,
Next
you know,
level, yeah.
next level. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, I think I think there's so much that's wrong with that in the sense that where's the trust in, in somebody who's new,
Mm.
who has kind of earned their stripes in terms of their education. And don't get me wrong, we know that people, you have to come to any industry with a degree of competency. But, that's ridiculous, what you've just described, and trend forecasts and everything else. And I don't, and I'm sure there's a financial aspect to it,
Of course, yeah, I
you
do think
know,
that.
whether that's exploitation or a kick on from COVID or,
Mm.
previous recessions. But at the same time, I don't know. Maybe there's some arrogance at play there as well in fashion.
Yeah, I think your point on a cost thing, like I know for a fact that you can do certain degrees in fashion. Some is a bit more business commercially aware, where you don't necessarily make things. It's less of a design role. It's more of a trend forecasting role or a strategic role or a buying role. And she very much did a making sort of design role. So obviously there is a level of responsibility on you to apply to roles that suit your kind of skill sets. But some of these briefs that she's been tasked aren't just necessarily a brief on trend forecasting. It comes with a design brief as well. So you're doing two things. You're given that kind of cultural relevance part of the brief where you have to back up why you've done your design. And even the design stuff she's had to do, she's had feedback on tasks.
Mm.
Then have to do a task to have feedback on to get into another round and then do another task in the second round. It's mad. But I think what I find frustrating is that maybe, in my opinion, tasks have always been to kind of maybe remove people that out of the equation of a job role who haven't bothered to apply for a task. And the fact that she's had to have feedback on an initial task, surely like and some of this feedback is very much, can you make it more commercial? But I find that hard because I think junior talent, you kind of want them to have mad ideas that don't necessarily fall within maybe the most commercial execution, because you're just going to make everything look the same.
Yep.
So I think it's hard because I think people should be hired in a kind of graduate and junior roles from maybe that the fact that they've got some sort of flair to them, that they've got potential. They aren't the finished article, and they're never gonna. I don't think I could hire someone now and expect them to kind of deliver on the most commercial minded idea with some strategy behind. I didn't even know what that was when I was 21.
And nor should you, though. I think it's like you said in the thread that, it very much homogenizes creativity. And what you do there is you cut off fresh growth before it's even begun. I mean, what the hell? Like, do you not want those people who are bushy-tailed and bright-eyed? And I'm not being idealistic here, because I understand that there's the major factor of money at any agency size, right? In any industry, of course there is. Not being blinkered. I mean, I'm not sort of idealistic in the sense that I just go, let's all go out running the streets naked and be creative.
Yeah.
It's like, but what I've seen time and time again, and I don't know if I'm hoping you can tell me if this is something that's echoed at Love, but in the really good agencies that I've spent time in, whether it's interviewing them, whether I've just been there with my portfolio, time and time again, there's trust from the top down, and not just respect, but a love of their staff, a love of their flair and their individuality and the diversity within the agency. And I think of like Dixon Baxi and Bulletproof, and I've interviewed Simon and Apova from Dixon Baxi and also Gush Monday from Bulletproof, but they all echoed the same sentiment, which was, we want people who are competent, who've got skills. They obviously know the industry, they know the job they want to do, and they're applying for it for a good reason. But beyond that, that's when we want to get into the good stuff. We want to know who they are, what their hopes and dreams are, what their passion points are, what's their story, because that's what enlivens our agency and brings fresh ideas and actual creativity to the table. So what is Love like in that regard? I mean, I'm guessing from the outside looking in, with the really good work and the energy that we referred to earlier, that this is a thing.
Yeah, definitely. I think Love is very different from a lot of places I've worked. There's a lot of trust, and it definitely requires a sense of you've got to take ownership. So I think that also puts ownership on people that are maybe in the middle sort of management to kind of really look after fresh talent. And we've got lots of junior designers in that they're all super different. And I think they've been purposely hired because they are all really different. We've got really good crafters, we've got big idea people, we've got people that might be a little bit more inclined to be art directors versus kind of people who love to kind of draw every day. We've got people who are really chatty versus kind of more introverted people. So I think, I don't think, because obviously Love's been going for 20 years. I think people who do hire know what they're looking for as well, and what works, and the holes that might be in the team. So I guess another thing what they do well is that they've got good relationships with universities. Again, I've mentioned my sister did a 4-year Sandwich course, and we have a great relationship with I think it's Lancashire, is it UCL?
UCLan.
UCLan, that's the one. Sorry, I'm terrible at remembering all these university names.
That's all right. I studied there, otherwise I wouldn't have known it myself.
We've got a great relationship with them, and we've had many people come through them. And what's great is that they come for a sandwich year kind of internship, and it might not be a whole year of internship. It might be 6 weeks, it might be 3 months. But it kind of lets them test the water of different agencies, and a lot of them love coming to us and just kind of experiencing different kind of things we do, because we don't just do packaging, we do interior design, we do branding, we do advertising, animation. So there's lots of kind of skill sets within our agency that they can learn from. And often they get back in touch after they've graduated. And because we've known them and we've been on hands-on with them within that kind of year out, we kind of feel like we've kind of bridged the gap between graduating and becoming a commercial designer. So yeah, I feel like we've kind of always been good at that.
Yeah.
And we could be better. I think everyone can be better.
That's the thing, isn't it? None of this is a search for utopia. But it's very much about not allowing the horrible thing you've described, which is just barriers and gatekeepers and let's face it, exploitation, which is I think what it is.
Yeah.
I believe the same with sort of free, whether it's free pitching and freelancers working for free and everything else. I think like a lot of things in the creative industry that are wrong, you hold that, the lens of another industry over it. It's always
Yeah.
interesting to do that with the trades. It just wouldn't happen, would it?
No, not at all. It's just one of those mad things that I feel like it's happened for so long that I just don't I generally don't know how people can get out of the habit of it. I think it's just been normalized that no one's brave enough to kind of fix the problem. I personally think graphic design and advertising is a lot better than it was. I just think fashion in particular is just still in the dark ages.
Yeah. So in terms of, I thought what an interesting thing to do would be, so I think, let me have a look. I've got the note here. So Erin McDougall, that's right. Erin, on your thread, came up with a really good point, and it was about the sort of sentiment that businesses can feel frustrated that universities haven't sent students out ready to go, so to speak, and um, and that universities feel like, well, that's not their job to kind of have someone ready for industry. So I wondered how you feel about the responsibilities of each. And I personally think that university, really, I don't think it's their job to send people out, primed. I think it's their job to kind of get the raw skills in place, almost sowing turning the soil and kind of getting exciting, interesting people with a half decent portfolio who can then go out into and find their way, because it doesn't matter if you send someone out packaged, they're going to have to find their way and make some mistakes anyway, because that's the very nature of creativity, isn't it?
Definitely. I think it's a really interesting one because I feel like universities are becoming more corporate businesses, and art colleges in particular. I know for a fact that Leeds Arts University, which was Leeds College of Art, has now become a university since I went. I think I got an Open University certificate because they weren't classed as a university. But I purposely went to art college because I wanted to go to art college. And I think Norwich, Glasgow, Leeds, and is it Falmouth? Maybe they're the kind of main ones out of London that to exist that kind of had that kind of unique selling point, I guess. But because I've noticed that maybe over the last few years, because they are becoming businesses, they're kind of selling these courses as if they will land you a job. They have to meet these kind of stats that so many percentage of students get a job in industry in the first year, blah blah blah. So if you're kind of going to base your kind of promise to students, especially when they're paying £9,000 a year, I do feel like maybe there is a responsibility from them, and also maybe a responsibility that they need to look at their own curriculum. And obviously there's still kind of that kind of cultural and art history aspect to it, that everybody wants to kind of go to art college and use the facilities and use the library and maybe have a greater knowledge of how maybe kind of get your critical thinking in place. But there is also the practical side, especially in graphic design, where I've known people that never open Photoshop on their graphic design course, or knew how to use the Adobe Suite. And I do generally feel that obviously that's a responsibility as a student that you need to go and seek that out. And there's tools online now that you can learn that yourself through YouTube. But I do think there's a responsibility in one sense from your course to make sure that is offered to you and that you do take that up. But it's a tricky one because I think you're meant to go to university to kind of expand your ways of critical thinking, and it's not necessarily all about the practical side. But I also think maybe they need to be a little bit more grassroots with the way they approach agencies and look at, locally. There's lots of great kind of agencies within Leeds. I was recently asked to pull together a talk at Leeds College of Arts, and it's quite interesting what they see, or Leeds Art University. So I'm getting all my names wrong. It's interesting to see who they see as their alumni as well, and I think it frustrates me sometimes that they forget who their alumni are, and probably aren't bringing in the people to speak to their students who are appropriate for, again, exposing their students to industry. I remember being at university and my tutor kind of just brought in kind of people maybe who was in her circle of mates, and I never actually experienced even a female designer come and talk to us. I shouldn't really say female designer, but a woman who worked within the design industry. It was a lot of kind of her bloke friends who came in and chatted to us, and it was I never really kind of saw myself within who they brought in. So yeah, I don't know. I think it's one of these things where obviously a lot's changed, and I think things are getting better in that respect. And I think agencies themselves are wanting to go into kind of universities more because they are. I think agencies are definitely wanting to ensure that they do hire the best talent, especially locally.
Yeah, and like we said as well, it's good agent for good agencies. It will be about potential. It will be about about getting people who've got those basics, but it's I like to think of it as guardrails. And this was a term that I picked up from Ben Ryan, who was he won. I interviewed him. I was working with him, and I interviewed him at the time, and he was England rugby sevens coach, and then went on to win Olympic gold with Fiji, and he used that term in respect of getting players who had a lot of flair and a lot of raw talent, but hadn't quite connected with the discipline and the training side of things. So his job as a coach, he very much thought, was to find that line between allowing that flair to thrive and helping to keep them on track with his expertise as a coach. And I think that really has to apply to any industry within reason.
Yeah.
I just think that if that's what a superior is there to do. And I also think that within the right structure, if the business is managed well, surely it's about there's an aspect of upwards learning as well. So if you've got exciting new ideas and a fresh take on things, you mentioned like the TikTok thing. I'm completely like I haven't really gone there with it. I've dipped in and out thinking, do I do it as an author? But I think that if you bring people in with an awareness of new stuff and they've got different things in their own time and professionally, then there's a certain degree of upwards learning. And those senior roles can very much provide the guardrails, but there's nothing to say that they can't learn too from those new people.
Oh, definitely. Like, I think not to keep going back to COVID, but I remember thinking when in my old job we hired this junior designer, and I really struggled to kind of put myself in her shoes at some points because I was obviously trying to teach her things, but I don't think I would be the person I am today if I hadn't gone into, a studio environment. And it sounds silly, but like the music I listened to was very much through people I met, maybe the trainers I wore. And it's even like now when I'm working with younger designers, I'm like, wow, where's that from? Or yeah, what lunch are you eating? Like I've met, I because I Manchester's got loads of places you can eat for lunch. There's so many people that we've got people who work for us who are from Brazil or Russia, or we've got Scousers, and everyone's just it's just a really good melting pot of loads of different sorts of people. And I've got such a soft spot for kind of some of our junior designers because they're so different from where I come from and my background, and what they're into is really interesting as well. Like what TV do they watch? Where do they go out? Um, I think you definitely need to kind of be in those sorts of environments and learn from one another.
Yeah, and I think what you've described there applies to both environments as well. And I
Mm.
think that both university and businesses have a responsibility to provide that diversity in that lovely melting pot of people, because that's what's magic about whether it's the right kind of college or university. But why
Yeah.
does, that shouldn't have to change in business. And I think in the right environments, it doesn't. But then I also think that both have a responsibility too, like you said, to provide the nuts and bolts and to just make sure that they are being respectful of what is required in industry. And it's not to say that any transient piece of technology should be suddenly adopted on the course, because it's, all creative courses to a degree should be about lateral thinking and about, living like a broad
Yes.
experience of life so that you pick up all the reference points. But at the same time, like you say, if people are being bundled out of a 3 or 4 year course
Mm.
without an essential piece of kit, which isn't going to change for the foreseeable future, then you have to wonder, because let's face it, if that was, again, to go back to the trades, but if that was, let's say, an electrician course and they hadn't been taught how to use wires, you're kind of going to be going, right, hang on a minute. It's all well and good, knowing about stuff, but you, you can't send people out completely floundering either.
No, no, I do. It's a tricky one because I think, um, yeah, I think obviously technology and software does play a big role, especially in kind of our industry. But I also think like maybe the way people think is probably been challenged through recent times as well. Like maybe because of courses are again coming back to universities becoming businesses. They're pulling people more and more people on the courses. When I first went to Leeds Arts University, our course got sold to us because they only hired or took on 40 people per year. And I remember, and as I think some of my friends thought that as well, where that was a challenge. It was like a massive achievement to be put on those courses. And I guess in some ways that might be a little bit gatekeepery now. Maybe there's more opportunity for lots more people to kind of get and experience these courses. But I also at the same time, if you there's I guess lack of funding or lack of facilities to kind of accommodate the kind of numbers now. And people aren't getting the same one-on-one time as they were 10 years ago, and they're paying 3 times as much.
Yeah.
So we are getting junior talent through who might really struggle tackling a brief in the sense of a simple kind of ideation sort of brief where coming up with ideas is a struggle sometimes, and that's worrying.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing, and I think that's why there has to be such an emphasis kept on the thinking side of it. And for this book that I've got coming out, I interviewed my old course leader, Steve Wilkin, who was the illustration course leader at UCLan. And Steve's brilliant. He's very much a kind of he was always thereabouts in the studio and there to ask questions and what have you. But there was very much a degree on kind of self-led learning too. I always found that it was a good balance on that particular course. But I interviewed Steve in depth because he'd since retired, partly because of the reasons we've just been talking about and the way the course had gone. He was there 25 years, I think.
Mm.
So he'd seen that kind of move into these and the more business side of it. And what he noticed quite quickly, and we talked about in this interview, was the fact that the sheer weight of those fees and that transactional nature of what the course had become had
Mhm.
created such a fear of failure, which is disastrous on a course like illustration because it's all about experimentation and
Yeah.
finding out. And he couldn't get anyone to take any risks from even in the first year
Oh, wow.
because it was like, well, they wanted to go from 0 to 100, and as you and I know, you absolutely can't do that with creativity.
Oh, definitely. Like it is mad. I do kind of, you just reminded me of a conversation I had recently with a tutor. And again, I'm coming back down to Leeds Arts University, but they've got a course at the moment. I'm talking openly, but I'll say this now. But they have I think it's a graphic is it a comic book course? What's
Graphic novel.
graphic novel? Sorry, I'm not doing very well remembering all the words. Um, a graphic novel sort of degree.
Mm.
And she was saying that this wasn't her course. This was I think she's a printed textile designer. But she was saying that there's just no jobs within that. And it's the most I think it's the most popular course in the university right now.
Wow.
And I do feel like there's a level of responsibility of if you're putting students through that course and you know that that industry doesn't necessarily exist, where are you sending your students or how are you linking them up with industry? I think, again, are people not taking risks in the sense of are they all making very commercial work to get into the places that do exist? Um, I don't know what I'm trying to say, but
No, I get you, and that's an interesting one with graphic novels because obviously there's I think a lot of that. I mean, it's much more at the sharp end than illustration is because obviously illustration I can choose
mm,
from a, a large number of global businesses to go and take my work to, whereas graphic novel, you are talking about self-publishing and
self-publishing, yeah.
self-initiated thing, which I mean, if there's clarity about that up front, then I guess people want to do it, then great. But I think there has to be transparency because you are getting into sort of slightly immoral territory otherwise, you know.
Yeah. And I think you also need to maybe teach that those kind of skills can translate to maybe game design or um, animation. But yeah, I think I just remember the kind of the kind of topic of that discussion was she was worried for those students and she was worried that they'd kind of been sold this course with a promise that there was jobs out there for them. And again, I think it's probably a sign of the time. Like my partner's very much into gaming and there's just so many redundancies at the moment in terms of kind of game design and people who kind of work within the kind of artwork side of those kind of companies. So it is hard. I think it's hard all round.
I think so, and I think with the rise of AI, that's there's so many unknowns there as well. And again, you can't, the courses they're going to take time to respond to that stuff, aren't they? Because it's happening at such a pace.
Oh yeah, I don't, that's a massive topic. I can't even touch upon that.
No, no, me
Um,
neither. I just occasionally see things doing the rounds and go, "Oh shit!"
yeah, I think I saw a video of some puppies in the snow yesterday,
Oh
and
God.
everyone was. I think people are worrying about. I think it was like the new witch. Is it the new Wizard of Oz film, Wicked?
Yes.
And there was kind of comparisons to how that film's been kind of made and shot, and there has been AI used within that, and it's scary that you're kind of using AI within now films. I didn't even know we were there yet. It's crazy how fast
Yeah.
things are getting.
It's revolutionary pace, and it's there's a lot of guesswork going on in terms of what the ripple effect is for jobs. I mean, that's a whole nother conversation, isn't it? But I think that when it comes to, I think that was an interesting thing that you said about the the sidestepping almost, the way that the graphic novel skills might bleed into game design and other things. And I think this is one of the biggest jobs of a creative course, is to hopefully unlock people's minds to a degree where they can start to see how they might traverse into a different discipline. And to be honest, I think I'd be really struggling just now in my career had it not been for I've always had a brain that needs variation. Like I need to have another exciting challenge. And sometimes I go too far where I'll pile myself up with, silly amount of things, well, most of the time, to be honest. But, at my core, I'm an illustrator. That's my full-time job. But I write a lot too. And there's this podcast. What's lovely about that is they open doors. It becomes a biosphere. So I start to get opportunities with a combination of those skills. I think we're going to need that more and more with things like AI. I think that but the fine line rests between. So I actually made a note of one of these job descriptions, and I read the intern article that came up in your Twitter thread about the internships. And I'm just going to read this out for listener. The second job is a plant shop in London who was looking for a junior creative to join the team and required a candidate to have 2+ years of creative experience in an agency or client side, motion experience, and an interest in developing video and animation skills, creative, strategic, and bold ideas with the energy and determination to make those ideas real, and a good understanding of the key digital and offline channels such as Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, display advertising, billboards, and in-store, as well as how to effectively match the content in the audience's experiences. Fucking hell. I mean...
That is literally what my sister's having to do. It's mental. I do pride myself to be a bit of a jack of all trades in what I do, and I would love to be super crafty. I get jealous of people like yourself who are amazing at illustrators. I'd love to be able to illustrate to a standard, and I do work with illustrators all the time to kind of maybe develop the idea I've kind of hit a brick wall with. But I do get overwhelmed myself as someone who's been in the industry for 10 years. Like I see people who have, very clever people who can just pick up every sort of animation. They can do 3D layout design, web design, and I just personally cannot take up all that information. I kind of sometimes think to create a great kind of career, you do have to kind of specialize a little bit. And hats off to anyone who can be multi-skilled in that sense, but it's just too much to take in. And I think it's just very overwhelming, especially if you're entering the industry now and you're having to kind of feel like you have to be, the expectation is you have to do all these different things. That must be really terrifying, quite intimidating, because I think entering a creative job in the first place is actually quite a scary thing to do.
Yeah.
And I've always worked in very friendly places, and generally, even though everyone's very lovely and welcoming, I've always sensed that juniors are very nervous and they always self-doubt themselves. And it's something we always go through. But I can't imagine having to kind of step into a junior role that expects you to do all those different things and also not pay you very much as well. So
exactly. That's such an assault on the confidence to ask all of that of you, because there will be people who look at that and go, oh God, I'm just not up to this career, and that's really wrong. But also, it's just kind of demeaning, really, as well. And I guess my point there was that it's one thing to be able to, like you said, be a bit of a jack of all trades. That's great to be able to turn. I think that's part of the crux of being a good designer or a good artist, is that you can take a load of ingredients and cook something, at least decent, hopefully great from it. But that's the thing with me. It's like I know my circle of competence, and I think that's the difference between that pile of ridiculousness and actually going, well, okay, I've got these 3 things within here, and actually they all come from the same personality, the same person, and the same energy, which is great. But you can't get into that sort of thing and be anything other than just a watered down yes person.
Yes, I think I also think those sorts of job adverts, they basically need to hire about 4 people.
Yeah.
So put these adverts out just to see who they get. It's like a bit of like, let's see, let's add all these different criterias in and let's see who can tick the most boxes and we'll get them in for cheap. Or they don't know who they want. I feel like there's a lot of places out there that generally are they've got so much work. Again, lots of different kind of disciplines within their kind of agency or studio or brand. A lot of these kind of job adverts I see are actually maybe in-house positions where
Yeah.
they want someone who could do everything. And I just think they're just fishing for someone to bite and be able to kind of, like you say, try and say yes to all these things naively and hire them cheap.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think it's almost like a red flag for an
Mm.
organization that either doesn't know itself very well, or is just kind of, I don't know. I don't want to be too offensive. I don't want to lay into anyone that I don't know who's put that job advert up and their reasons or whatever. But I think that's kind of an alarm bell, isn't it, for someone who's serious about being a good designer or what an animator or whatever their role might be. I
Yeah,
think that is just should be a bit of a red flag. But then that also brings us back to the that everyone's getting squeezed, aren't they? So you
yeah,
know it's tough.
yeah, definitely. And I think they probably, again, this is probably something that maybe all courses should have, but these kind of career advice sort of sessions where you kind of get talked through how to apply for a job, what to look out for, red flags, how to write an email. That's another thing that I'm sometimes
That's
shocked about. Um, the bare basics of applying for a job is sometimes missed from juniors, and um, yeah, I think that's a whole different discussion as well. So
There's so many
there's so many
offshoot.
offshoots. Yeah, I'm not even sticking to one thing as I answer your questions.
Yeah. um, what's the? Do you know what have you got like if we were to pull away obviously the financial constraints and whatever and the parameters of all this, what would the kind of ideal company agency sort of thing, what would that look like in terms of it's a bit of a wishy-washy question, really. I'll give you an example. So Graham Wood, who was one of the co-founders of Tomato in the 90s, I interviewed Graham and I adored his work when I was studying. It's that very kind of distressed, organic. They did a lot of stuff for Underworld and music videos
Yeah.
and they were it was very much mixed media. So yeah, he's very much got a distinct visual style, but he was never afraid to jump in and try a new medium with that and find out how it worked in different spheres. Um, but he talks about Central St. Martin's when he studied late 80s into early 90s and how it had this very much old school art school feel. And there was like one Mac at the time. But what that created was this brilliant scarcity where people had to find solutions through other means. And it just created very creative minds and adaptable people who could solve problems with very little, so that then when they got into industry, they could work magic when they did have the tools.
Mhm.
I think that's a really important thing, scarcity. But when he describes that place and how everyone was always around the campus all the time, because why would you want to go anywhere else? It's like I get a real buzz even just thinking about that. And then when I think that there are agencies who, okay, you can't quite have an agency that is art school because the two are very different things.
Yes. Yeah.
But when I walk in the right kind of agency and there is that kind of crackle and people seem very happy to be there and there's that mutual learning and there is massive diversity where you're going to meet someone from a country that you might never otherwise encounter somebody from. What does your kind of, if you had that dream workplace and not to say that love's not that, but like, you know, I don't know, let's just have some fun with it.
This is a really hard question. I think I think again, because I've worked within industry and I've seen pre-COVID and post-COVID and how there's definitely a different generation shift. So I've worked in places, especially as a junior, where it was like music full blast, like you say, there's electricity to it. But I don't know how I don't actually know how I coped with some of that because it was very intense and
Yeah.
the hours were intense and there was a very much an old kind of boys club sort of vibe to some of the places that maybe I interned at, or you there was like a way that if you were the first to leave it was quite a shameful thing. So that's definitely something I'm glad that's been left
Yeah.
behind. But then we've got this opposite extreme where we've got, agencies popping up now that just want to be fully remote. And I think that's actually quite hard. And I think you have to be an exceptional junior designer to be able to work in those places as well. Or you have to work especially hard as a team to hire junior talent and train them up. Um, and I think that could be I personally think that's quite hard as well because, again, I feel like you have to be with someone physically to be able to do that.
Hmm.
So my idea would probably be a nice hybrid of the both. I still want, a studio that feels that it's got some energy to it, but there's still, calm and maybe a hybrid approach where maybe you have one or two working from home days. I love the idea of like an internship program that maybe gives you a full view of a studio experience. Like maybe interns shouldn't just work in the design team; they should work within accounts. They should be, at the front door on the desk, and just to give them a 360 view of how an agency works. Because I generally work with people who went to art college and didn't necessarily like doing the design part. They actually loved being the project manager.
Hmm.
And I think sometimes there's shame around people who don't necessarily end up wanting to be a designer. And they end up leaving the industry because they don't feel that they're creative enough, whereas they are. They might just be better suited to be in another role in an agency. So I would love something like that maybe.
I think
Uh,
that's a brilliant point, actually. I think that's a really, really great point about the switching up
mm,
because people, and it isn't just so much, people change, don't they? When people's, as you move through life, your points of reference, your inspirations, your motivations, they all change because life changes. And creativity is such an extension of self that it, by default, changes with it because it's whatever you're into at that point. It's whatever's getting you out of bed in the morning, whatever you're, maybe it's something that you're really, you really don't like that's motivating you. There are so many things that creativity can be. And I think that that's a really great point. And it's maybe it's a really bad comparison, but I always think of like, again, to take it back to Leeds, I think of like when Marcelo Bielsa was managing Leeds. He's one of those managers that came in and it was the first thing that he did was go through every department of the entire club from top to bottom, from the catering staff to the ball boys or whatever. And and just because he wanted a culture there where everyone was excited to do their bit
yeah.
of that project and knew that it wasn't just about those 11 players on that pitch by any stretch of the imagination. And what that did was, it just got everyone excited about this project. But then in terms of the switching over, I think that's a really, really great shout because again, not only do people change, but there might just be stuff that you've never even thought about, and a role you
Yeah.
never even knew about, and you might talk to that person and go, "Well, oh my God, like it took me till 35 to start properly writing fiction,
Mm.
but I adore it, and it's informing my art in ways that I never even imagined." And the fact there is, sometimes your life is on a certain timeline, and you can't rush that. So, what's to
Mm.
say that someone who's, like you say, has been in a company 10 years might just anyway, I think to pull down those doors and kind of have opportunities for that and to have crossovers and make sure that there's a culture, I think that's a really great shout, actually. And I think that on a social level, you mentioned introverts there and things. I think that that would also help in that regard.
Yeah, definitely. No, there's like um going back to love in the sense of I actually work with people who have been there for, 10, 15 years. One of my account directors actually started on the front desk and was given the opportunity to work within accounts and project management. Which, that's an amazing thing that it was an open place that was, she got kind of, she kind of progressed through the business. That's a really great story. And there's other people who I know that again went to study graphic design but discovered copywriting. So writing like yourself was something that they really loved and probably fell in love with more of the word side of stuff than, and the ideas, than the actual execution. And even my partner, he did a graphic design degree like me, but ended up more in a digital role, and is a great web developer now. But and people really love working with him because he has obviously got a great design eye and he can code to the spec that they've designed to. So I do generally feel like there's so many roles you can take, and I think there needs to be a bit more of an openness that it's not just a straight, narrow career path to junior to creative director. You can definitely change your mind along the way. That doesn't matter. And you don't have to be a clean cut graphic designer. You can do all different things.
Yep. Very
Yeah.
much,
Or
very much so.
creative
Yeah.
illustrator, or I know plenty of illustrators that are absolutely amazing animators now because they felt that they wanted to kind of take their work in a new direction.
Yep.
So yeah, I do think that's something that probably needs to be promoted a lot more in education.
Yeah, I think that would be really great. I mean, I would love to sort of start, throwing around some solutions, but I don't think it was ever going to be that kind of conversation. I think I just wanted to kind of have a bit of a mazy chat about, about sort of the state of things and what's going on. I mean, I think, like you said, solutions is a very hard one in this regard because there are so many factors, and not to mention the state of the economy. But I just think that ultimately, I think understanding of creativity is a good one. That's kind of what I'm on my mission for with this show and the book, and trying to separate it from people's assumption that it's just being good at art, and actually when you start to understand that, that's when opportunities like what we've just discussed there are likelier to come about.
Definitely. And I think there's so many factors in that involve this kind of topic of, I think my tweet was about the gap between university and kind of initial kind of graduate jobs. But as you say, like there's so many factors, like with AI, the economy, universities becoming businesses, not necessarily kind of providing their kind of students with support that they promised. I think I generally don't feel like maybe people who are hiring are at fault for a lot of this. I think it's just the greater kind of troubles of what's going on at the moment that it's just causing a lot of pressure, and people are kind of having to create different cuts in different areas. And I think at the moment, the first people to kind of get affected by all this are kind of people at the bottom, which is worrying because they're our future kind of thinkers and leaders, and we need to kind of keep that kind of progression in our industry. We want it to be as strong as it ever was.
It's kind of hard giving this kind of advice to people because I know when the shoes that I were in when after university were very, no souls on them, I suppose. But like I didn't. It's a really bad joke, but I didn't have a clue. I came out floundering from the lack of tutorial support and everything. So my confidence wasn't there to begin with, and it took time. But I guess I just want to encourage people to sort of believe in themselves a bit in the sense that it's fine to be specialists, and it's fine to look at some of these job adverts and go, no, F you, I don't, that's not cool. But that's not always the case, and there are good companies. And I would say, if almost be creative in the way that you get yourself that experience, in the sense that in my own case, I worked full time in jobs for 2 years, very, very, and I did that on purpose because I knew myself well enough to know that I would not deal well with financial pressure. So for me, it was better to have a full time job, have some income that I could spend on my portfolio, whatever it might be, a bit of a studio space in Preston at the time, and build a portfolio that was true to me and where I wanted to go. So that by the time I started to get work, my hope was that I would start to get the right kind of clients that were well suited. So I guess I can't comment on anyone's financial situation, but I would encourage people to trust in that their desire, the where they want to go, and to build work that reflects that, rather than take on something where you're not going to get paid, like a free internship, and you're probably going to get milked in in some company's image that is probably not worth working for. Is that something you'd agree with?
Yeah, yeah. I feel like you're gonna have to have some fire in your belly to go out and, you know, I guess sell yourself. And that's always been hard and that's always been the case. But I do think there are there are more people in industry that are becoming more aware of the challenges and do want to make a difference. And like you say, that not everyone is bad and not everyone wants to take advantage, because at the end of the day, people talk. It's a small community of, and it's a small industry as well. And I think I'm talking from graphics and advertising, but the reputation of agencies at the moment, because of, talent going elsewhere or not coming through, they want to kind of keep their staff. And they want to make sure that if they're going to be hiring, that they're known to be the best place for X, Y, and Z. So there's definitely people out there wanting to, create a buzz around what they do. There's also B Corp stuff going around at the moment. There's more and more agencies that wanting to kind of get B Corp credentials, and a lot of that stuff is actually it's less about the environment, it's actually how you treat staff.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, there is people out there who don't care. And budgets are getting squeezed, but I feel like there is a responsibility maybe from education to help people spot those red flags, and even responsibility from industry itself for calling out people who are doing bad things. I don't believe in cancel culture, but I do believe in ensuring that no one gets taken advantage of. So yeah, I think it's a hard industry to get into.
Yeah.
It always has been.
I think that's the thing, and it goes back to, again, that same old thing of it being an extension of self, which makes us vulnerable to a degree. And also, it's I think the be all and end all, and it's the reason that historically it freaks out parents whose kids choose to do it. Not everyone, you and I have been fortunate in that regard, but
Yeah.
is the uncertainty. It's human nature to fear what we don't understand. And I
Mhm.
think that when there are so many variables, as is the nature of creativity, you can, to a degree, you can't blame that approach, but that also makes it scary for those looking to get into it, because like it ebbs and flows all of the time, and things move so fast, especially in today's world. At the same time, there's loads of amazing things that come from that as well. So I think there's a lot of fear out there at the moment on many levels, and I think that it's a good idea just to step back a little bit and know that actually this industry is full of good people as well, and there will be people who take you under their wing and give you the best career you could have ever imagined. So fight for that and kind of believe and have the courage to knock back some of these nonsense pitches from companies, I guess. But
Yeah,
anyway.
definitely. I think it's definitely something I feel that as I've progressed, I get just as much of a buzz, kind of bringing someone on or seeing someone smash a brief under guidance that I've helped, give them, than doing the work myself. It's quite, it's just lovely, and I think I wouldn't be where I am now without, people who've mentored me, and I do feel like a level of responsibility of giving back. And like I say, there is a lot of people out there who do want to do good and really do care. And it also makes their lives easier if their team are happier, you know. Um, but yes, I do. There's a lot of kind of social factors within this, isn't there?
So
Definitely.
yeah. So many, so many. But I think you summed it up quite nicely there. Just before what we said there, I think that was a lovely overview. And at least for the purpose of this conversation today, I think we've covered a few bases there.
I think I've obviously meandered off a few times, but
Yeah, I think every show I've ever done does to a degree.
yeah, it's an important subject, and it's I don't have the right answer.
No, I don't think anyone does. I think that's the thing. I think it's just, but like you say, it's good. I think us being in industry and having that little more experience, I don't know if it's a responsibility, but I think it's really healthy that we have these conversations and in places where people can access them, because that's how the next people learn. And they might just hear one sentence that we've said tonight, or that is in that intern article, or whatever the thing is, and it might change a career, and it might, stop somebody from experiencing some of that stuff.
Yeah, and I think there's also a sense of I in my time I've heard people say, well, I had to go through that, or it was a rite of passage. I generally feel like that doesn't have to be the case.
Mhm.
And you don't have to be slogging on below living wage just because your boss did the same thing when he was 18 or she was 18. It's right, there's rite of passages, and there's also kind of holding people back and stunting people's growth from a professional level and a financial perspective as well. So yeah, I think we all need to be self-aware, especially at the moment where cost of living and just the kind of pressures of everything else. So yes, I think there's an element of gatekeeping that we all need to be aware of for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Brilliantly put. Yeah. And yeah, like you say, you do get that bitterness every now and again, but I think it's got to be careful. You got to try and make it better for the next lot, because it benefits us all ultimately.
Yes. Yeah.
Well, I think I've kept you long enough for a Monday night, Eve, and thank you so much
No worries.
for taking the time. I hope this has been of some use. And what I'll do is I'll stick the LinkedIn thread and the Twitter thread in the show notes. So if people want to kind of dig into some of the replies there and get a sense of the conversation, and that might help as for further reading.
It'd be good to hear what people's thoughts are.
Yeah, for sure. Well, cheers.
Thank you. Well, thanks for having me.
Big thank you to Eve Warren for taking the time out of a busy schedule in her role as Senior Creative at Love Creative in Manchester. That was brilliant. I really enjoyed that conversation, and I hope you guys did too. And it wasn't necessarily one where we were going to reinvent the wheel or find all the answers, but I think that we did cover some good ground, and that we maybe gave a relatively fair overview of what's going on, because we don't win. We found out with Brexit, we found out with Trump that we don't win by attacking people with other ideas to ourselves. It's about creating inclusive conversations, taking the time and having the empathy to understand why people feel a certain way. And in this case, I think we have to take into consideration the financial constraints that a lot of businesses have. That's the reality. People are squeezed. People have to make decisions they would otherwise not like to make. We all sometimes have to work for a client that we might, in a utopian world, have more autonomy over deciding whether we do work for them or not. We've all felt that. We've all had to take roles or projects that do not fit with the dream, but that's our reality. And that's the same with a lot of these businesses. But at the same time, I think there is, as Eve highlighted, great need for more conversation around this ugly trend of just placing crazy demands on new talent, which is counterproductive to the overall cause of creativity, which is our export in the creative industry. That is what we do. We're there to bring innovation, imagination, fresh, brilliant ideas, and we don't get that from new talent by dumping 5 people's jobs on them. It's as simple as that. So we have to find another way around that. We have to start being more respectful, and I hope that conversations like this will contribute to that cause. So thank you, guys. As I mentioned earlier in the show, please take a look, bentallenwriter.com/shop for the Creative Condition book. 10 years of research, 2 years of writing, 64 exclusive interviews, a hell of a lot more contribution from fields of science and psychology and the arts and sports and all kinds of things that I think are going to help bring all the best stuff from this podcast over the years together with a lot of new material, so you can grab it right now. Signed copies, paperbacks, bentallenwriter.com/shop. You can also get the ebook on Kindle. Pre-order at the moment, out on April 11th, when I will be shipping any physical copies, and you will immediately get your ebook copy on the day. So good stuff. Kickstarter book's going out as we speak. If you want to support the show, and I hope you will consider that if you're listening right now, please take a moment to head to your preferred podcasting platform and leave a little rating. A review would be lovely, whatever you have time to do. Spread the word. Please tell a friend. If you enjoy the show, please share it on social, share it by word of mouth, whatever fits into your schedule. But it all really helps me drive this cause of helping people to understand and embrace creativity for fulfilling lives and optimal careers. That is the cause. Big stuff coming up weekly as ever, 5 a.m. GMT every Wednesday. This show is out. It's not easy to do that, but I love it. This is my cause. Thank you for listening. Thank you to Eve Warren from Love Creative. I'll see you next week. Nice one, guys. Oh, can't forget the lovely sponsors of the show, the founding sponsor, illustrationx.com. Go check out their global range of illustration and animation portfolios at illustrationx.com, and please take the time to check out the Ukrainian Institute, championing and connecting Ukrainian creative industry talent at a horrible time of war with other countries, so that these people can still get opportunities despite the horrors they're having to experience. Head over to ur.org.ua to see more and find out loads of great stuff for you to feast on. Nice one, guys. Take care. Have a wonderful week. Stay creative.